We have talked a lot on this channel about all the different tech layoffs that have happened in 2024. Some of the bigger companies have laid off anywhere between 7 and 15% of their workforce. We've had C-level executives say that they can't find quality employees. We've had big time organizations say that they've laid off people because they were underperforming. And we've seen all kinds of crazy stories going on in the workforce, especially around tech. Now, some of you guys in the comments seem to be very happy about this and feel like people in tech were making way too much money and you're happy to see them come crashing and burning, which is not very nice, but that's your opinion, okay. As someone who's worked in tech exclusively for 15 years, I obviously don't feel like that. I feel like me and my peers should still be getting paid, even if it's at a pay cut, but we should still have jobs and all the jobs shouldn't be outsourced. But I guess that's my personal story. But one of the main reasons that there have been so many tech layoffs is because it's really a correction from where we were in 2020, 2021, where companies were massively overhiring, where people were still stuck at home and they were just stuck with technology. They were doing Zoom calls, they were buying things online. The whole world was basically work from home, and these companies that focused on being able to provide goods and services to people in their homes really thrived. So that meant that all of these tech companies were just hiring with no real long-term plan, no 10 to 15 year strategy of how you're going to use all these employees. So once the world opened up again and people were able to finally step outside their front door, then these tech companies decided it was time to lay off the extra people that they hired that they didn't really need anymore. So today I have a couple articles where we're going to talk about the great tech reset of 2024 and why some of the experts are saying that there is a reset and a correction happening in the tech market in 2024. Let's dive in. Our first article is from Forbes, and the headline is The Great Tech Reset, Unpacking the Layoff Surge of 2024. And as always, all the articles I reference are down in the description below, so you can read the whole thing for yourself. I'm just going to talk about the highlights and how it pertains to our discussion for today. The article goes on to say, in a stunning reversal, the tech industry has laid off over 124,000 workers in 2024 alone. What's driving this wave of layoffs, and what does it mean for the future of work in one of the world's most dynamic sectors? The layoff landscape. In August 2024, Intel sent shockwaves through the market by announcing a 15% reduction in its global workforce, roughly 15,000 jobs. Just days later, Cisco Systems announced plans to lay off 7% of its employees, marking its second round of job cuts this year as the company shifts focus to rapidly growing areas like artificial intelligence and cybersecurity. Earlier in February 2024, Cisco laid off more than 4,000 employees. These are not isolated incidents. According to Layoffs.fyi, 384 tech companies have laid off more than 124,000 employees in 2024, adding to the 428,449 tech workers who lost their jobs in 2022 and 2023. While the broader job market has shown some resilience, the tech sector's cuts are particularly visible due to the sheer scale of these companies. Even a small percentage reduction translates to thousands of lives and families upended. So why are these layoffs happening? A confluence of factors has created the perfect storm for the current wave of layoffs in the tech industry. Number one, inflation and higher interest rates. The U.S. Federal Reserve's aggressive rate hikes in 2022, aimed at curbing the highest inflation rates in 40 years, have had far-reaching intended and unintended consequences. While these measures have begun to tame inflation, they have also significantly increased the cost of borrowing and servicing debt. Companies, particularly those in the tech sector, are now forced to scale back on their growth investments and hiring as they divert hard-earned cash to cover their debt obligations. The impact has been severe for tech firms that borrowed heavily during a decade of near-zero interest rates and abundant capital, leading to deep cost cuts, austerity measures, and inevitable layoffs. Number two, economic downturn and recession fears. Despite pockets of strength, the U.S. economy remains on shaky ground, further complicated by the turbulence of an upcoming presidential election. Recession fears fueled by government debt concerns, geopolitical tensions in Ukraine and the Middle East, and the lingering effects of the pandemic have prompted companies to tighten their belts. In the tech industry, where profitability per employee is critical, layoffs have become a necessary cost-cutting measure as firms brace for economic uncertainty. Number 3, the AI factor. Artificial intelligence is profoundly reshaping the tech landscape, creating both opportunities and threats. While AI promises to generate new jobs and boost productivity, it also poses a significant risk to those who fail to adapt. IBM's decision to cut 3,900 jobs in its marketing and communications divisions, while freezing hiring for roles that can be replaced by AI, is a stark illustration of this trend. The shift toward AI-driven efficiency is forcing companies to rethink their workforce strategies. Pandemic overhiring. During the pandemic, tech companies embarked on an overzealous hiring spree, driven by a belief that the surge in digital demand would be permanent. In response to the challenges such as the Great Resignation and the rise of quiet quitting, companies scrambled to fill positions, offering unprecedented perks, work-from-anywhere arrangements, and generous incentives. Firms like Meta nearly doubled their workforce, only to find themselves overstaffed as the world began returning to pre-pandemic norms. Now these companies are urgently correcting course, leading to widespread layoffs. Number 5, outsourcing and offshoring. The American workforce may have inadvertently weakened its position during the quiet resignation and quiet quitting movements, compounded by the ongoing debate and drama over returning to the office. In response, companies are increasingly turning to talent in Latin America, Eastern Europe, the Middle East, Africa, and Southeast Asia, where they can hire highly educated workers at a fraction of the cost. The threat to American jobs is not only from AI, but also from a global workforce that is willing to work hard, adapt, and deliver without the associated complexities. The human impact. The fallout from these layoffs is deeply personal and far-reaching. Behind every statistic is a person, a friend, a colleague, who may have a family to support, college tuition to pay, and bills to cover. These are often highly skilled professionals who now face an uncertain future. The wave of layoffs is reminiscent of the dot-com bust of the early 2000s, but with a crucial difference. Today's tech workers are older, more experienced, and often more deeply entrenched in their careers. The psychological and financial toll can be overwhelming, but it doesn't have to be. For example, a colleague of mine, a seasoned software engineering project manager with over 10 years of experience, found herself jobless overnight and is now navigating the uncertainty of the job market. I suggested she explore specific opportunities in the data center, cybersecurity, customer experience outsourcing, and data science industries where there is a strong demand for skilled US-based project managers. This moment calls for a great reset in how we address this crisis and prepare for the next phase of the industry. As someone who's been looking for a good project management role in really any industry, it's really not as easy as just like, oh, I didn't think about this industry. No, you see the jobs that are listed online and you apply to them, and maybe it'll be your lucky day and they'll give you a job. Who knows? The handling of these layoffs has sparked significant criticism. In many cases, companies have left employees in the dark for weeks or even months, fostering a toxic atmosphere of fear and uncertainty. It's a stark reminder that despite claims that employees are their greatest asset, companies often sacrifice their workforce first in times of crisis. For example, Microsoft laid off 1,900 workers just 5 days before reporting a 17.6% increase in revenue to $62 billion, while Amazon dismissed 1,000 workers despite a 14% rise in revenue to $170 billion. To make matters worse, some companies are rumored to be reducing severance packages right before layoffs, further eroding trust. Looking ahead, the current wave of layoffs raises critical questions about the future of work in the tech industry. Will companies continue to prioritize AI investments at the expense of human workers? Will the industry return to its previous growth trajectory, or are we entering a new era of consolidation and efficiency? And most importantly, how can companies better support their employees through these turbulent times? As we navigate these challenges, it's clear that the tech industry is at a crossroads. The decisions made today will shape the future of the industry and the lives of millions of workers for years to come. In this period of uncertainty, resilience is crucial for those affected. Equally important is the need for the community to come together with compassion, helping one another identify new opportunities, offering resume reviews, providing career advice, and setting realistic expectations. While the tech sector may be contracting, the demand for skilled workers remains strong. And just a little side note, also people in the comments have said, oh, you just got to skill up, you got to level up, you just don't have the right skills. I mean, if you've been doing a job for 15 years and you've been making good money at it, I think that you have the skills. I don't think it's as simple as saying you don't have a job right now because you don't have the skills. I think just the landscape, unfortunately, is changing and not in a good direction for the employees. For example, demand for data center construction is stronger than ever, driven by an insatiable thirst for AI. Starting new ventures would also be considered a viable path forward for those impacted. Whether it's pivoting for new roles, upskilling in AI, or exploring emerging fields, there are numerous paths to success. The key is to stay adaptable, keep looking ahead, and continue leveraging your network and resources. So I think the article did a really good job of identifying the different reasons why tech is having so many layoffs this year. They definitely overhired, like we talked about in the opening, and everyone is looking towards AI, and I'm sure it's helping and it's getting rid of jobs where people didn't really need that much intelligence or that much effort to do a good job. But I think the strength and power of AI, as we talked about before, is greatly exaggerated, and I don't think that is the main reason for all these layoffs. I mean, the main thing that I always come back to is, I don't know if he was the first one to do it, but I really remember when Elon took over the company formerly known as Twitter, he laid off a whole bunch of people, and it seemed like it was down to a skeleton crew, but the company is still afloat, and they were able to make things work, and I think that opened up a lot of eyes to other companies and other executives that I guess we don't need as many people. Maybe we don't have all this innovation and we don't have all this cutting edge stuff, but we can keep the lights on and still lay off a whole bunch of people. And then since then, we've just seen so many different layoffs and layoffs and layoffs, and that's all led to a huge uplift in these companies' stock prices, shareholder value. There's two different ways to increase your bottom line. You can make more money, which I don't think most of these companies are really doing, or you can reduce your expenses. And to these companies, their employees are just an expense. I mean, they could talk about family and culture and all this crap, but when the rubber meets the road, they're going to kick you out and not even think twice about it. And they're going to do whatever it takes to increase their bottom line. And if the economy is doing this rough, and if the cost of materials are this rough, the one thing that they could easily replace or just completely get rid of is people. And especially like we talked about previously with how easy it is to offshore talent to India or nearshore to Mexico and other parts of Latin America. There are many ways for these companies to continue to make money without having to pay American salaries. Our next article is from techtarget.com, and the headline is Tech Sector Layoffs Explained, What You Need to Know. This article covers many things we've already talked about, but let's talk about the things that are different in this article. Layoffs are making headlines, and most seem to be centered around one job sector, tech. It talks about the UKG, or Ultimate Kronos Group layoffs that I made a video about. We're talking about all the stats from layoff.fyi. It talks about artificial intelligence, which we covered earlier. Okay, investor pressure. Investors want companies to decrease expenses as revenues slow down. Venture capitalists are worried that profits will be down this year after the large growth period. For example, TCI Fund Management called on Alphabet, Google's parent company, to reduce headcount and take action for improved profitability. Other big tech companies such as Meta and Microsoft also faced backlash from investors, saying their headcount was too high compared to other companies. Post-pandemic reality. Many workers hired during the pandemic were not entry-level employees, but experienced software engineers and developers earning salaries in the six figures with generous benefits. Companies are facing too many employees with redundancy and overstaffing. Companies had high hopes to continue this rate of growth. However, as restrictions lifted, people returned to pre-pandemic lifestyles. With the return to previous work environments, big tech companies are removing the extra layer of employees hired during the height of the pandemic. Technology for working from home, such as Google Meet, Microsoft Teams, and Zoom, are still being used, but with lowered numbers since every meeting is no longer online only. Several workers are returning to the office for collaboration and sharing ideas. It's return to office or be fired. Mature industry. The tech layoffs may also be the result of the industry maturing or becoming more stable after rapid growth. Tech companies may not be on pace to acquire as many new customers since many people have already adopted their services. Instead, tech companies may be looking beyond growth and into diversifying products or expanding globally. Silicon Valley Bank collapse. In March 2023, the tech industry faced another obstacle as the Silicon Valley Bank collapsed due to lack of diversification and a bank run. SVB funded tech startup companies when other banks were unwilling to take on higher risk. With the collapse of SVB, more venture capitalists and banks are going to be nervous about taking on the risk of startup companies. Will layoffs spread into other industries? The U.S. tech industry accounts for about 8.9 million people in the total workforce. According to CompTIA's State of the Technology Workforce Report, even though there have been several layoffs in the tech and media industries, other labor markets have been steady. Larger tech companies make the news with large cuts, but some smaller and mid-sized companies are still hiring tech workers, according to BLS. So I believe out of everything we read, the best way that it was summarized was a perfect storm. These companies overhired during the pandemic with no long-term plan for everybody. There is this drive to cut as much cost as possible and use AI to maximize the output of fewer workers. Major companies have shown that you can just lay off a bunch of people and that the remaining workforce will pick up the slack, even if they're doing 2 to 3 people's jobs for the same amount of pay. It's better than, I guess, being fired to let go of yourself. And a lot of the smaller companies no longer can really get the same kind of financing because of the risk associated with doing business with them. So for myself and others in the tech industry looking for a new opportunity, things have been pretty grim the past year. And unfortunately, it doesn't look like this great tech reset is going away anytime soon. Talk to you later.